Great. So what I'll be talking about is, as Dylan said, repeating my words, stupid customer tricks, by which I mean there are scenarios in which there are typically communication issues with the customer. Sometimes you need them to review some of the more rudimentary parts of their system that are that they are convinced are working fine, and consider your request to be insulting to their intelligence. And so we're going to talk about some techniques we can use to kind of help them to work with you in these scenarios. The first one I want to cover is to borrow a internet meme, RTFM, read the flippin' manual. Okay, and you get those users from time to time, and they call you up, and obviously, from the question they're asking, they don't know how to use the software. They didn't research it on their own. They didn't look at it on their own. Or maybe you offer some suggestions and they disregard them or fail to report the results of the suggestions. Like for instance, you might say, I need you to clear your index, and I need you to restart your machine, and I need you to refresh your cache. And they'll come back and say, yep, the refresh or the restart went great. So then what do you do? So regardless of if you're working on email or on the phone, what we find is a great technique is to give them an ordinal numbered list. Number 1, I want you to re-index your machine. And then number 2, I want you to take a screenshot and post that to this ticket. Number 3, I want you to restart your machine. Number 4, I want you to save a snippet of the log and post it to this ticket. And these multiple steps in order give a subliminal signal to the customer's brain that each step depends upon the step before, and encourages compliance with the whole list. Having numbered items that require responses help you to make sure that the end user is actually following the instructions as they're given. Now, the next scenario. I made the file myself. It can't possibly be bad. Okay, so I want you to check in your root.xml or your server.xml, and I want you to tell me, what does the connector look like? Oh, well, I don't need to check, they say. I just made that file, and of course, there's nothing wrong with it. Are you kidding? Usually, it's a lot easier to convince people of this if they are using a larger or more complicated file. Our typical method, or my typical method at least, is ask them to post a copy of the file onto the ticket and just say, hey, let me look at it. Let me just make sure, there might be something you're missing. Just put it on there. And you can mention, it's important to mention in a lot of scenarios, especially configuration files may have passwords or other sensitive information. So if you have some sort of tool that can be used to sanitize it, or if you can give simple instructions to, like a connection properties file will often have passwords to connect to other components. So you may want to tell the end user to go in there and just clear out the password so that it's not easily visible, so that they can feel more comfortable with it. A key to this, when you're done, you fix the file, you edit it, you put the right statements in there, the right directives. Don't make it their fault. You say, somehow this must have gotten bad information in it. It must have gotten edited by an automatic process somewhere. But here's a good version. Put that in. It'll work great. Okay, so sometimes, and this is especially affects for those of us who work on apps that involve networking in some way or another, which certainly is all the Atlassian folks in the room and probably most everyone else. I mean, there's hardly anything left in the world that doesn't use networking of some sort. And so how often do you ask someone, are you sure the server can reach the database? Oh, yeah, I'm sure. How do you know the server can reach the database? Oh, I'm pinging the database right here on my computer. Okay, so how do you know the server can reach the data? And you'll just go around and around and around, and they'll just assume, hey, I can get to it from this part of the cloud. Obviously, the server can get to it. I can get to the server. I can get to it. So oftentimes, there's nothing but a screen share. You just get to a point where you're like, we need to do a go-to meeting or join.me, and I need to watch this process. With any luck, You'll be early in your exploratory process, and you'll be able to ask a number of questions, and you'll maybe even be able to pawn the screen share off as a exploratory kind of session where you're kind of trying to figure out the nature of the problem and the breadth of the problem. But while you're there, you'll have the wherewithal to say, okay, now SSH to the server, now type in this command, ping address, and get a for real, for sure answer of if the machine in question can connect to the machine that it's trying to connect to. We do this because half the time the customers are begging for a screen share anyway. I mean, it's really frequent that my end users will say, can we just do a screen share and get this over with? So it's usually cathartic for them. If there's a phone call involved as well, that does give a level of personal love and attention that a lot of folks feel better about. Okay, so number 4. So I tied a brown onion to my belt, as was the style at the time. And I don't mean to unfairly characterize the more experienced members of the computing world, but you run into people from time to time who have got a lot going on in their life, they've got a lot going on at their job, and they have a lot to talk to you about, of which some is related to the actual issue, and some may even be related to the product that you're there to support. And so it's important to rein these folks in, right? I mean, you don't want to just let them spend 20 minutes talking to you about, their kid's baseball game this weekend or whatever, right? No, you got a problem, you got to get to it, you got to figure it out. So first, you got to cut them off. Okay, if they're off rambling, cut them off by addressing them by name. Say, hey, Chris, we got to focus. We've got to resolve this problem. All your users are out there waiting to use their product, and they can't. So let's get it going. And then if you have any questions, start with asking the questions, kind of get them in that process of answering the specific questions that apply to the product and the problem. And then after that, start bringing your questions into a closed sort of nature, where the question has a simple one-part answer. It's a yes or a no, or what specifically did the error message say? Did it say permission denied? Did it say file not found? Make it precise. Give them questions that they can answer precisely and quickly. The reason this happens, and the reason we have to do this sometimes, is because system administration can be a stressful job. If the stuff breaks, you've got a big user group oftentimes that's really concerned with how quickly it's going to be back online. And when people get nervous, they talk. And so, sometimes system administrators, they're under the gun. Maybe their boss is telling them, this is the 3rd time this week, get that thing running or else, right? And so they're trying to blow off steam. Maybe they're trying to help themselves feel more comfortable. Whatever the reason, we want to bring them back to the topic, and if possible, help give them a little bit of confidence that we're going to be moving on the right path. And this is kind of a hardware problem, so it's not anything that we run into here ever. But this is really, it's certainly from my last position where we did do a lot of hardware stuff. This was really important. And this is another one in the category of, no, I'm sure it's hooked up fine. Well, is it plugged in? Of course it's plugged in. But that's what you get every time you ask if it's plugged in. So you can't ask if it's plugged in, because they're going to, the end user is just going to... Is it plugged in? Here, I'll just take it out and blow on it to make sure that it's not got any dust in it, which is my point. What we can do, at least what I've always done, if you're having that argument, let them know, sometimes that component will have dust infiltration, and it'll build up resistance on the contacts. You got to pull it out, blow on it, get the dust out. If you have a can of air, it's even better. Plug it back in, it should be fine. With any luck, the user will go there, and they'll go to blow on it, and realize that it wasn't plugged in the first place. And of course, they're not going to tell you this, right? They'll just plug it in and move on with their lives. But what's the end result? The end result is it starts working. And so, Yeah, also, it actually does work on Nintendo cartridges, although I don't know why. Because it's...
because you didn't plug it in properly the first time.
Yeah, it's probably just a loose connection. But yeah, this is a great method because it'll help you get to the core issue more quickly, and it'll help you to skirt the loss of face that people try to avoid in a scenario like that. And most importantly, they'll actually think that it's a real troubleshooting technique. So for the rest of forever, whenever their Nintendo cartridges don't work right. All right, that's what I've got.